The bench had been there for 30 years. It sat on the east side of Meridian Plaza, tucked against a low stone wall where the shadow of the tower fell at noon and then retreated by 2, leaving the slate-coloured seat warm and exposed to the afternoon light. People walked past it all day. Delivery workers, lawyers in dark coats, a woman who sold magazines from a fold-up table nearby. Almost nobody sat on it for more than 5 minutes. The plaza was a place you moved through, not a place you stayed. Diane Okafor stayed. Not by choice. Not at first. She stayed because the number 47 bus didn't arrive until 12:50 and she had 41 minutes. And the bench was the only place to sit that didn't require buying something. She had worked the breakfast shift at Kellner's Catering 3 mornings a week and the early weekday housekeeping rotation at the Harland Hotel the other 2, and her lunch break fell between those 2 worlds in a gap she could not fill. She had 3 children. She had $61 in her checking account and a cell phone on its last bar. She had a sandwich made from bread she had bought on Sunday and turkey she had stretched across 5 days. That was it. That was where she stood on a Tuesday in October, 7 years ago. She did not know the tower above her had a name. She did not know that the glass and steel building casting the shadow behind her seat housed on its 44th floor the executive offices of Durrell Capital Group, a private investment firm with holdings in commercial real estate, logistics, and medical supply chains that together were worth just over $3.8 billion. She did not know that the man who ran it had grown up 40 minutes from where she sat, that he had worn shoes with a hole in the left sole through his first winter in the city, or that he still ate lunch outside when the weather allowed because a building, no matter how tall, could make you forget what air felt like. She did not know any of that. She unwrapped her sandwich. If you have ever eaten something you made yourself because you couldn't afford anything else, you know how it feels to do it in public. You know the small discipline of it, the way you hold your face steady. Diane had been doing it long enough that she didn't think about it much anymore. She sat straight. She smoothed her uniform slacks. She ate half the sandwich, wrapped the rest carefully in the paper, and set it on her knee. The man came from her left. He was sitting at the far end of the bench before she registered that he'd arrived. Tall, even sitting, with a grey knit cap low on his head and a coat that had been good once, a long charcoal wool that had lost 2 buttons and picked up a stain at the left cuff. He sat with his hands between his knees and stared at the mid-distance with the particular stillness of someone who has run through their options and come to a stop. Diane noticed the stain. She noticed his hands. They were not the hands of someone resting between destinations. They were the hands of someone who had nowhere to go. She looked at the half sandwich on her knee. She looked at him again. She did not deliberate long. She was not the kind of person who deliberated long about small mercies. She had been taught by a mother who had almost nothing that you did not hoard what little you had. You shared it because the person next to you might be where you had been, or where you were going. "You hungry?" she said. He looked at her. Something moved in his face that she couldn't name exactly. Not gratitude, not surprise, something older than either. "Yes," he said. She held out the other half of her sandwich. He took it. He said, "Thank you." He ate it slowly, the way a person eats when they don't know when the next meal is coming. She looked away to give him privacy. The bus would come in 23 minutes. She watched the magazine woman arrange her rack and thought about nothing in particular. "You work over here?" he asked when he was done. "Nearby," she said. "Hotel mostly?" He nodded. He asked if she had children, the way people sometimes ask when they're trying to locate another person in the world. She said she did. 3. The youngest was 4. He nodded again and was quiet for a moment. "My mother had 3, he said. "She worked mornings." "It's the only shift you can get sometimes," Diane said. The number 47 arrived. She stood, tucked the empty wrapper into her bag, told him to take care of himself. He said the same. She walked to the curb and got on the bus, and did not think about him again that day, except once, riding home past the park when she felt the particular lightness that comes from giving something you couldn't spare to someone who needed it more. That was October. If someone had told her then what that half sandwich would cost her and what it would return, she would not have believed them. She barely believed it later, when she was standing inside that tower looking out at the bench from 44 floors up. We are getting ahead of things. Diane had grown up in this city, in a neighbourhood 7 miles south that the planning maps used to call mixed use, and the residents called home. Her mother, Clara, had cleaned offices for 30 years, retiring at 63 with bad knees and a fixed income, and the absolute certainty that every person who walked past you without making eye contact was not better than you, only luckier so far. Clara had raised Diane and her younger brother on that belief, and on meat bought on Tuesdays when it went on sale, and on the habit of making do without complaining. Clara's hands had been rough by the time Diane was old enough to notice hands. She had worn the same pair of work shoes for 4 years, resoling them once, and had never once treated this as a tragedy. She treated it as information. Shoes could be resoled. Children could be fed. The rent could be managed if you paid it first before anything else, and did not talk about the other things you had paid it instead of. Clara had talked to God every morning and to her children every evening, and had not spent much time in between worrying about what could not be changed. The lessons had not been lectures, they had been demonstrations. The way you moved through a grocery store when you had $20 for the week was a lesson. The way you answered the landlord's call on the first of the month, your voice steady and your words specific, was a lesson. The way you set a bowl of soup in front of a neighbour who had come by with something empty in her eyes and did not say a word about your own lean week was the most important lesson of all. You gave what you had. You. Not what you had left over, what you had. Diane had made do. She had married at 24 a man named Kevin who was funny and warm and who disappeared from their apartment on a February night when her youngest, Abby, was 3 months old, leaving behind 2 car payments, a half-explained absence, and the phone number of a woman in Cleveland she would have preferred not to know about. She did not hear from him again. She filed the paperwork. She arranged childcare. She found the second job. The 3 children were Marcus, who was 9 when October came that year, Simone, who was 6, and Abby, who was 4 and still needed the kind of tending that made the morning schedule a military operation requiring Diane to have everything ready the night before, because there was no margin. There was no margin for anything. She packed her lunches on Sunday. She tracked every dollar in a ledger on her phone. She knew to the cent what the bus cost, what the after-school program cost, what Abby's daycare cost, what the school lunch accounts cost. She kept a second list in her head of things that had been broken for more than 3 months and had not been fixed. The bathroom faucet, the porch light, the handle on the smallest dresser. She was not behind. She was $140 a month from not being behind, which was the same as being behind, and she knew it. On the nights when all 3 children were asleep and the apartment was quiet, she sat at the kitchen table with her phone and her ledger and went through it. Not because she enjoyed it, because the only way to stay level was to know exactly where you stood. She knew what the electric bill ran in winter. She knew that Marcus needed new sneakers by November, or she would hear about it from his teacher. She knew that the after-school program raised its rate by $12 a month in the fall, and that $12 was her lunch budget for the week. She moved things around. She substituted. She made the math work by a margin so thin it could disappear for a reason as small as a late bus and a missed shift. She didn't tell her children this. She did not want them measuring themselves against the margin. She wanted them to feel fed and warm and ordinary, because ordinary was the gift she could give that cost the least and meant the most. Do you know what that kind of arithmetic does to a person? It doesn't break them, not if they're made the way Diane was made. It makes them precise. It makes them economical with everything except kindness, because kindness costs nothing and gives back more than you put in. That is a thing the poor know that the comfortable forget. She gave the half sandwich because she had one to give and because she was her mother's daughter. That is all. The man's name was Conrad Wells. He was 53 years old that October. He had built Darrell Capital Group from a single distressed property acquisition in his mid-30s into what it had become. And he had done it through a combination of financial precision and the ability to read a room that people who had never been poor rarely developed to the same degree. He knew what it cost to be in a waiting room without bus fare. He knew what it looked like to eat what you brought because you couldn't afford what they sold. He had been on the other side of that window for 20 years, but the memory did not fade, and he did not let it. He had been on that bench because he had walked out of the tower and sat down. That was the truth of it. He had been in a meeting on the 39th floor about a logistics acquisition that his team had been tracking for 8 months, and somewhere in the middle of the projected returns his head had cleared and the numbers had become shapes without meaning, and he had excused himself and taken the elevator to the lobby and walked out into the air and sat down on the bench he had passed every working day for 11 years and had never sat on. He was not ill. He was not in crisis. He was something older and quieter than that. He was tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. He had lost his mother in August. Josephine Wells had gone quietly, which was the way she had done most things. She'd been in a hospital on a Thursday and gone by the following Monday, and Conrad had been there both days and the days between, sitting in a chair that was not designed for sitting and holding her hand when she was awake and watching her breathe when she was not. He had arranged everything afterward with the efficiency he brought to large and difficult problems, because that was how he kept moving, and because she would have wanted him to keep moving. She had not raised him to stop. What he had not done was sit still long enough to feel it. He had not sat still since September. The meetings had continued, the acquisitions had continued. Troy had kept his calendar full, and Conrad had kept his face composed, and everything had proceeded as it was supposed to proceed. And the thing he had not yet let himself feel sat somewhere below his sternum, like a stone he kept working around. He had lost his mother in August. Clara was not her name was Josephine, and she had cleaned offices for 31 years in a city 400 miles away, and she had done it without complaint and without praise, and she was gone. And he was sitting on a bench in her honour without knowing exactly that was what he was doing. The woman in the catering uniform sat down next to him and ate half her sandwich, and then gave him the rest without knowing who he was. She looked away while he ate. He had not eaten since 6 a.m. He had not asked for anything from anyone in a professional context in 20 years. She gave the sandwich the way his mother had given things, simply and without theatre, and he ate it and thanked her and asked about her children, because asking about children was the way his mother had located people in the world too. He watched her get on the number 47 bus. He sat on the bench for another 12 minutes. Then he went back inside. He did not forget her. He did not immediately know what to do with not forgetting her. He knew only that a woman in a catering uniform had given him half her lunch on a bench outside his building and had looked away while he ate it and had told him to take care of himself, and that this had mattered to him in a way he could not calculate and therefore could not file. He told his assistant, a careful young man named Troy, that if he ever saw the woman again, the one in the uniform, he wanted to know. Troy was accustomed to Conrad's requests, which were usually specific and logistical. This one he filed as something different. What Conrad did not know, and what the listener has already guessed, is that Diane would be back on that bench in 2 weeks, and in 4 weeks, and then every other Tuesday for the next 8 months, because the number 47 ran on that schedule, and the lunch gap was the lunch gap, and the bench was the bench. Troy saw her on a Thursday in November. He called Conrad from the lobby. Conrad did not go down immediately. He stood at the window on the 44th floor and looked at the bench from above, at the figure in the uniform and the coat, eating her lunch with the same composure she had had in October, and he thought about going down and could not make himself do it. He was not sure what he would say. He was not accustomed to not knowing what to say. He had built a career on reading situations and entering them correctly. This one had no model he could apply, and the absence of a model stopped him in a way that very few things stopped him. 2 days later, she was gone when he went to look. He thought about it again through the following week, the woman, and the bench, and the sandwich, and the way she had looked away while he ate, a small courtesy that he kept returning to. He thought about his mother. He thought about the women who had been invisible their whole lives to the buildings they kept clean. He thought about what it cost to extend a small mercy to a stranger when you yourself had nothing to spare. He thought about it for 3 weeks, and then it was December, and the bench was cold, and he did not see her. In January, Diane had a problem that was not new but had become acute. She had known it was coming since September, when the notice went up in the housekeeping break room on a Tuesday afternoon, and nobody said anything, and everyone understood. 41 people who had been employees on a Friday would be contractors on the following Monday. The work would be the same. The hours would be the same. The rooms would be the same. The pay would be the same, but the benefits would be gone because the contract model carried none. Diane had stood in that break room and read the notice twice and then folded it and put it in her pocket and gone back to the cart and finished her shift because there was no point in not finishing. The Harland Hotel had shifted to a contract staffing model for housekeeping, which meant that the 41 people on the floor rotation, including Diane, were no longer employees but contractors, which meant no benefits, which meant the health coverage she had carried for Marcus's asthma medication was gone as of the first of the month. She had known it was coming. She'd spent November calling every number she could find for alternative coverage, and had found a gap program that would cover the children but not herself, and had enrolled in it, and had paid the first month's premium with money she had been putting aside since September by eating less at lunch. She did not cry about it. She told her mother on the phone. Clara said that was a sin and that someone should be made to answer for it, and Diane said yes, Mama, and felt a little better for having been seen. Marcus's inhaler cost $62 without coverage. She had worked out that she could get him through 3 months on what she'd saved, and after that she would figure it out. That was January. She was still eating on the bench in February. Same bench, same time, same half sandwich. The cold had come and gone. She wore a heavier coat. She did not think about the man in the worn, charcoal wool often, but when she passed the bench she thought about him for a moment, the way you think about someone you did a small thing for, wondering briefly where they ended up. Troy saw her on a Tuesday in March. He called Conrad. Conrad was in the elevator before Troy finished the sentence. He came out of the lobby wearing no coat and crossed the plaza and sat down on the bench 3 feet away from her, and she looked at him and recognized him, and he could see the recognition land. 5 months was enough time that she might not have. He had wondered about that in the elevator. She had seen him once on a cold afternoon, in a coat and a grey cap, eating half a sandwich she had given him without knowing his name. But she recognized him. He saw it in the still moment before she spoke, the small reorganization behind her eyes, the way she straightened almost imperceptibly, not away from him but into herself, as if checking that she was still who she had been the last time. "You still work nearby," he said. "You still eat outside," she said. He looked down at her sandwich. She still had half. "I owe you one of those," he said. She shook her head. "You don't." "I know I don't," he said. "I want to, anyway." She looked at him for a moment. In her face was the particular assessment of a woman who has learned not to accept things without knowing their weight. "I'm Conrad Wells," he said. She told him her name. She told him she had 3 children and worked 2 jobs and caught the number 47 at 12:50. He nodded. He did not tell her what he did. He asked about the children by name because she had told him in October that she had 3, and now she told him their names. And he listened to the names the way people listen when they are actually listening. The bus came. She stood. She said it was good to see him again. He said it was good to see her. He stayed on the bench after the bus pulled away. He went back inside and called Troy and told him to find out who she was. What Troy found took 3 days. He found her name in the hotel's contractor records, found the childcare enrollment through a publicly listed daycare that used the hotel's corporate partner directory, found the school district from the children's names, found that she had filed for modified benefits through a county gap program in January, and that the filing cited a loss of employer coverage. He found that she had been working 2 jobs for at least 3 years. He found that the son named Marcus had been enrolled in an asthma management program through a county clinic, and that the most recent prescription refill had been paid out of pocket. He found all of this because Conrad asked him to, and because Troy was good at his work, and because Conrad did not ask without a reason. Troy placed the file on Conrad's desk on a Friday morning without comment, which was the right thing to do. Conrad read the file on a Friday afternoon. He read it twice. He sat with it over the weekend. On Saturday, he drove to the neighborhood where his mother had lived and parked outside the building for 15 minutes without going in, which was something he sometimes did when he needed to think. The building was not his anymore. A family with young children lived there now. He could see toys on the second-floor landing through the security gate. He sat in the car and thought about Josephine, and about a woman on a bench who had given him half her lunch and looked away while he ate it, and about the file that said her son used an inhaler that cost $62 a month without coverage. He thought about his mother's shoes. He drove home. He was not a sentimental man. He was not in the habit of confusing generosity with investment. But he understood, in the particular way that people who have been poor and are no longer poor understand, that Diane Okafor had given him something she could not spare, had given it without asking for anything in return, had not changed her posture or her dignity in the 5 months since, and that he could do something about the distance between where she was and where she ought to be. He could not do everything. He knew that. He was not in the business of fairy tales. He was in the business of making things work. On a Monday morning, in late March, Conrad walked into a conference room on the 31st floor and spent 40 minutes with the head of facilities and the director of people operations. And when they were done, he walked out and told Troy to arrange a meeting. Diane got the call on a Wednesday. The caller said her name and then said she had been identified for a building coordinator position at Darrell Capital Group, and that if she was interested, she could come in for a conversation at her convenience. The position would be full-time with benefits. The annual salary was $54,000. Diane sat down. She asked the caller to repeat the salary. She thought about the $62 inhaler. She thought about the faucet that had been broken for 4 months. She thought about the bus schedule. She said yes. She arrived on a Thursday morning in a navy blazer she had borrowed from her mother and pressed the night before. She had told Clara, who had cried and then said she always knew, and then cried again. She had told Marcus and Simone, who were old enough to understand that something good was happening. She had told Abby, who had asked if it meant they could get the good cereal, and Diane had laughed for the first time in what felt like months. She had stood in the lobby of the tower before. She had stood in the lobby of a lot of buildings like this one, carrying a cleaning caddy or a catering tray, moving through the marble and the glass the way people move through places that are not meant for them. She had always moved through those spaces with her back straight and her face composed, because that was what dignity required in a place that did not expect you to have it. She moved through this one the same way. Straight back, face composed. Troy met her in the lobby and walked her to the elevator and pressed 44. The doors opened. Conrad was standing in the hallway. He was wearing a dark suit. He was not wearing a grey knit cap. He was not wearing the coat with the missing buttons. She knew him anyway. She had known him from the first instant, the moment he sat down in March. What she had not known was the scope of it. She looked at him and then she looked out through the glass at the plaza 44 floors below, at the bench, at the exact spot where she had unwrapped her sandwich and shared half of it with a man she thought was hungry. He was watching her face. "You own this building," she said. "I own this building," he said. She was quiet for a moment. There were things she could have said. She said none of them. She pressed her fingers together at her sides and breathed. "The job is real," he said. "It's not charity. You'd be coordinating facilities, vendors and contracts for this floor and 2 others. It matches your background. Troy will show you the actual job description." "Why?" she said. He did not look away. "Because you gave me half your lunch when you had no reason to and looked away while I ate it. Because my mother did things like that her whole life. Because I can." She held his gaze for a long moment. "I need the benefits," she said. "My son has asthma." "The benefits start on the 1st of next month," he said. "That's standard for all hires." She nodded. She was not crying. She was the kind of person who did not cry in rooms she had just walked into. "All right," she said. "Show me the job description." If you have ever watched a person discover that a single ordinary thing they did without thinking was the thing that changed the direction of their life, you know it doesn't look like a movie moment. It does not arrive with swelling music. It looks like a woman in a borrowed navy blazer standing in a hallway asking to see a job description. It looks like someone deciding to take the thing she has been offered and do something worthy with it. Diane took the job. She was good at it from the first week. She was good at it because she had spent 7 years managing logistics on no money and no margin. And the skills are exactly the same, only the numbers are larger. She could track 3 vendors and 2 contract renewals, and a maintenance schedule and a budget line simultaneously. And she did. She was exact. She was thorough. She did not waste time, and she did not let things slide, and she did not accept being talked past in a meeting. Troy liked her immediately. He told Conrad 3 weeks in that she was better organized than either of them, and that her vendor renegotiations had already saved $11,000 in the first quarter. Conrad was not surprised. He knew what he had seen on that bench. There is something that happens between people who have both known what it is to go without, a language below language, a recognition that does not need to be spelled out. He never spoke to her about his own history in those first months, not directly, but she figured it out the way she figured most things out, through observation and patience and the practice of paying attention. She learned that he had grown up in public housing, that his mother, Josephine, had worked for 3 decades without ever once being recognized by the people she cleaned for, that he had built what he built partly out of love for her and partly out of rage on her behalf, and that the rage had softened over the years into something more useful, the habit of noticing people who were doing the invisible work of holding everything together. He had sat on that bench in October because he needed to be close to the ground again, because buildings can separate you from the things that made you. She understood that. She had never left the ground. She understood that too. Marcus's asthma stabilized by May. The medication, covered now, did what it was supposed to do, and the boy who had been missing 3 school days a month was in class every day, and bringing home papers she put on the refrigerator with pride she didn't try to hide. Simone had started a reading program at the library 2 afternoons a week that cost nothing, and gave her a librarian named Deborah, who read to the kids in a voice like warm bread, and who Simone talked about every night at dinner. Abby got the good cereal. Diane rented a 2-bedroom apartment 2 miles south of the tower in a building with a security door that actually locked and a landlord who answered the phone. She paid the first and last month herself. She did not borrow from her mother. She called Clara on the day she signed the lease, and Clara said she always knew, and this time Diane believed her. The bench was still there. She passed it every morning coming in from the subway entrance on the east side of the plaza. She passed it the way you pass a place that changed you, not with sentiment exactly, but with a kind of awareness. She'd given a stranger half her sandwich on that bench. She had not known who he was. She had not known it would matter. She had done it because it was the kind of thing you do when you are your mother's daughter, and you have been taught that you do not hoard what little you have. She sat on the bench on a Tuesday in October, exactly 1 year after. She had brought her lunch. She did it deliberately. The same food, made the same way because she wanted to know what it felt like to sit there with something to give and not need to give it. She wanted to know if she would recognize herself. Conrad found her there at 12:30. He had a sandwich too. His was from the deli on the corner, and it was larger and more elaborate than hers had been, and he felt slightly self-conscious about that when he sat down and saw what she had. She looked at his sandwich. He looked at hers. "I owe you one," he said. "You owe me one," she agreed. He had brought enough for both of them, as it turned out. They sat on the bench in the October light in the shadow of the tower, and then out of it, and they ate, and the plaza moved around them, and nobody who walked past had any idea what the bench meant or what had happened there or what was still happening. After a while, Conrad said, "I've been thinking about starting an internal mobility program for contract workers who transition to full staff roles, something more formal, structured." She looked at him. "You need someone to run it." "I think so," he said. "Send me the brief," she said. He smiled. It was a small smile, and it was genuine, which was the only kind he had. "You'd have to go full-time on that. It's a different role." "What's the salary?" he told her. She was quiet for a moment, doing the math the way she always did math, quickly and without any performance of surprise. "When does it start?" she said. "When you want it to," he said. She looked out at the plaza. The magazine woman was still there, the same rack, the same fold-up table, 30 feet away. Diane had learned her name in March. It was Bernadette. They said good morning to each other now. "My mother cleaned offices for 30 years, Diane said. "She never had benefits." "I know," Conrad said. She looked at him. "I mean," he said carefully, "that I know what that life looks like. I'm not trying to undo it. I don't think you'd let me, even if I were." She shook her head. "You can't undo it. It made me who I am." "I know that too," he said. They ate the rest of their lunch. The shadow of the tower moved and the bench went warm. A man with a stroller walked past, and the baby in it was staring up at the building with the focused amazement that babies bring to everything large. "My daughter asked me yesterday why I was happy now," Diane said. "Abby, she's 5 now. What did you tell her?" "I told her I always was. I just had more room for it now." Conrad was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "That's right." She folded her wrapper and put it in her bag. She had 15 minutes before she was due back. "Send me the brief," she said again. "I will," he said. She stood. She told him to take care of himself, the same words she had used the first time, the same easy warmth, the same directness, and for a moment he felt the October light and the bench and the year between them and what it held. He said the same. She crossed the plaza toward the lobby. Bernadette caught her eye and held up a hand. Diane held up one back. She had learned something in the year since she'd given away the other half of her lunch. Not a lesson exactly. Not something she could have been told. It was more like a confirmation. The world did keep accounts, though not on any schedule you could bank on. That the math worked out eventually if you did not let the hardship make you small. That you gave what you had because it was right to give, not because you expected it back. and that sometimes, when the return came, it came not as the thing you gave, but as something larger, something you did not know you were reaching toward. The mobility program launched 14 months later. Diane ran it. In the first year, it moved 43 contract workers into staff positions with full benefits. Conrad announced it at an all-hands meeting and gave a 3-minute address in which he mentioned a bench and a sandwich and did not use her name, but the whole room knew. Troy started clapping first. She was standing in the back with her arms folded and her face composed. She let herself smile once, briefly. The 43 people in that first cohort came from cleaning rotations, from contract catering, from the kind of work that keeps a building running but rarely earns a name tag with the building's logo on it. Diane had interviewed each of them personally. She had learned their situations with the particular attention of someone who had lived inside a situation like theirs not long ago, and she had matched them to roles with the precision of someone who had been managing scarce resources her entire life. She did not waste their time. She did not promise what she could not deliver. She told them what the job was, what it paid, and what the benefits covered, and she let them decide. She knew what it meant to be handed an opportunity that was real instead of theoretical. She intended every opportunity that went through her hands to be real. Then she went back to work. Marcus is 14 now and wants to study environmental science. His breathing has been clear for 3 years. Simone reads faster than any child in her class and has opinions about every book, which she shares at dinner whether asked or not. Abby is 7 and has strong feelings about cereal and also about fairness and also about what colour the bathroom should be, none of which she keeps to herself. Clara has a new chair for her living room, bought by Diane and installed by Marcus on a Sunday, and every time Clara sits in it, she says she always knew, and Diane says, "Yes, Mama. You always did." The bench is still there. Diane passes it every morning. She does not make a ceremony of it. She does not stop. But she notices it the way you notice a thing that holds a piece of your history, the way certain ordinary objects carry more than their weight. Some mornings a person is sitting on it, pausing between wherever they came from and wherever they are going. She does not look for hunger anymore. She looks for stillness. She knows what stillness means. On those mornings, if she has something to give, she considers giving it. The math on that kind of thing, she has learned, always comes out right. If you know someone whose quiet kindness has come back to them in ways they never expected, leave their name below. And if you want to see another story like this one, we have one waiting right here for you. This story is a work of fiction inspired by true events. All names, locations, and identifying details are the creation of the author.